The year 1950. Only a few years had passed since the end of World War II. The world was still trying to recover from its scars. Cities were being rebuilt, economies were struggling to stand again, and millions of people were simply hoping for a peaceful future. For a moment, it felt like humanity might finally be entering a new era of stability. But history rarely follows the path people expect, and 1950 would prove to be a year that changed the direction of the world. It was a year when a brutal war erupted in Asia, a massive earthquake shook entire mountain regions, and political decisions reshaped the borders of nations. Events unfolded that would influence global politics, economies, and societies for decades to come. In this documentary, we're going to explore 10 of the most significant events of 1950, moments that didn't just shape a single country, but helped shape the world we live in today. The Korean War begins, June 25, 1950. It was early morning on the Korean peninsula. The day had barely begun, and most people were still unaware that history was about to change. Then suddenly, the sound of gunfire echoed across the border. Troops from North Korea crossed into South Korea, backed by heavy weapons and columns of tanks. The attack was swift and unexpected. South Korean forces were caught off guard and struggled to organize a defense. Within just a few days, North Korean troops pushed rapidly south, moving closer and closer to the capital city of Seoul. The world was suddenly facing a new and dangerous crisis. But this conflict was never going to remain just a war between two countries. Soon, the United Nations stepped in and decided to support South Korea. Soldiers from the United States and several other nations joined the fight under the UN flag. On the other side, China moved to support North Korea. What had started as a border invasion was now turning into something much larger. It had become the first major military confrontation of the Cold War. Over the next 3 years, the war would claim millions of lives, and when the fighting finally stopped, the Korean peninsula would remain permanently divided. On one side, North Korea; on the other, South Korea, separated by a heavily guarded border that, even today, remains one of the most tense and fortified regions in the world. The first credit card. Back in 1950, the way people paid for things was simple. Cash was king. Every restaurant bill, every purchase, every transaction, people reached into their wallets and paid with cash. But that same year, a small idea quietly sparked a revolution. In the United States, a brand new payment system was introduced, the Diners Club card. It would later be known as the world's first modern credit card. And the story behind it is surprisingly simple. According to popular legend, businessman Frank McNamara was having dinner at a restaurant in New York City. When the bill arrived, he suddenly realized something embarrassing. He had forgotten his wallet at home. That awkward moment sparked an idea. What if people could pay for meals without carrying cash at all? What if a single card could cover the bill and the payment could be settled later? In 1950, that idea became reality. The Diners Club launched its card with just 200 customers and a handful of participating restaurants. It seemed like a small experiment, but in reality, it was the beginning of something much bigger. Because from that moment on, the world slowly began moving toward a cashless economy. Today, billions of people around the globe use credit cards every single day. All because of one simple idea, born from a forgotten wallet. Plutonium production expansion. In 1945, the world witnessed the terrifying power of nuclear weapons for the very first time. It happened during the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, an event that showed humanity just how destructive its own technology could become. But the real nuclear race was only beginning. In 1949, the Soviet Union successfully tested its first atomic bomb, the first Soviet nuclear test, RDS-1. Suddenly, the United States realized something alarming. It no longer held the world's only nuclear weapon. The race for nuclear power had officially begun. By 1950, the United States made a critical decision to rapidly expand its nuclear weapons program. Secret facilities across the country were enlarged and upgraded. Among the most important of them was the Hanford site in Washington state. Here, massive nuclear reactors were built for one specific purpose: to produce plutonium. Plutonium quickly became one of the most crucial elements in building nuclear weapons. Thousands of scientists, engineers, and workers were recruited for the project. Yet many of them had no idea what they were truly helping to create. The entire operation was surrounded by intense secrecy. In fact, it would later be considered one of the most closely guarded efforts of the early Cold War. This wasn't just a scientific project. It was a strategy, an attempt to maintain a balance of power in an increasingly dangerous world. And this growing nuclear competition would push humanity into a completely new era: the nuclear age. The start of the thermonuclear age. January 31st, 1950. The world was still recovering from the scars of the Second World War. Cities were rebuilding, nations were trying to heal, and people hoped that the age of devastating weapons had finally come to an end. But history had other plans. Just a few months earlier, in 1949, the Soviet Union shocked the world by successfully testing its first atomic bomb. For the first time, the United States no longer held the monopoly over nuclear weapons. Inside the White House, the pressure was immense. On January 31st, Harry S. Truman made a decision that would change the future of warfare forever. He officially ordered the development of a new and far more powerful weapon: the hydrogen bomb. Unlike the atomic bombs dropped during the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the hydrogen bomb was based on a completely different principle: nuclear fusion. Scientists believed this new weapon could be hundreds, even thousands of times more powerful than the bombs that destroyed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The decision triggered an intense scientific race. At laboratories like Los Alamos Laboratory, physicists and engineers began working day and night to unlock the terrifying power of thermonuclear energy. This moment marked the true beginning of the thermonuclear arms race, a competition that would define the Cold War for decades. And just 2 years later, in 1952, the United States would successfully test the first hydrogen bomb in an operation known as Ivy Mike nuclear test. The explosion was unlike anything humanity had ever seen. A new era had begun, an era where a single weapon could destroy entire cities, and where the balance of power depended on who possessed the most destructive force on Earth. The nuclear age had entered its most dangerous chapter. The Great Assam-Tibet Earthquake, August 15, 1950. As people across India were celebrating Independence Day, nature was preparing something devastating. Near the border between India and Tibet, the ground suddenly began to shake. Within seconds, a massive earthquake struck the Himalayan region with unimaginable force. This disaster would later be known as the 1950 Assam-Tibet earthquake. With an estimated magnitude of around 8.6, it became one of the most powerful earthquakes ever recorded in the 20th century. The shaking was so intense that entire mountains collapsed. Massive landslides buried villages beneath rock and mud. Rivers were blocked, and in some places, their entire courses were changed. Across the region, homes were destroyed in seconds. Thousands of people lost their lives, and millions were left without shelter. But beyond the tragedy, the earthquake revealed something important to scientists. It proved just how unstable and active the Himalayan region truly is, where the massive tectonic plates of the Earth continue to collide beneath the mountains, a reminder that deep beneath the beauty of the Himalayas, the Earth is always moving. The incredible story of the first pacemaker. In 1950, heart disease was already one of the biggest killers in the United States. Doctors often watched helplessly as patients with severe heart rhythm problems slowly faded away. The human heart depends on tiny electrical signals to keep beating. These signals act like a natural rhythm that tells the heart when to contract and pump blood through the body. But when those signals fail, the heartbeat can become dangerously slow or even stop completely. At that time, medicine had no reliable way to restart the heart. For many patients, a failing heartbeat meant there was little doctors could do. But one scientist believed technology could change that and save countless lives. His name was John Hopps, a Canadian electrical engineer working in medical research. While studying how radiofrequency energy affected the heart, Hopps made an incredible discovery. He realized that electric pulses could actually stimulate the heart to beat again. This simple but powerful idea would eventually transform modern medicine. In 1950, Hopps developed the first external pacemaker prototype. The machine was large, bulky, and powered by electricity. Doctors had to connect the device to the patient using wires placed on the body. Whenever the heart slowed down, the machine would send small electrical pulses to restore the normal rhythm of the heartbeat. It wasn't perfect, and the equipment was far from practical for everyday use, but it proved something revolutionary. For the first time in history, a machine could control the rhythm of the human heart. This early invention laid the foundation for one of the most important medical technologies ever created. Over the following decades, scientists improved the design, making pacemakers smaller, safer, and eventually small enough to be implanted inside the human body. Today, millions of people around the world are alive because of pacemakers, and every time a pacemaker restores a heartbeat, it echoes the groundbreaking work of John Hopps, the man who helped science give the human heart a second chance. The television revolution. The year is 1950. America is entering a brand new decade. The Second World War is over, the economy is booming, and families across the country are building a new life in suburbs and growing cities. But inside millions of homes, a quiet technological revolution is beginning. In living rooms across the United States, a strange glowing box is becoming the center of attention. It's called television. Just a few years earlier, television sets were rare and incredibly expensive. In 1948, only a few 100,000 American homes owned a TV. But by 1950, everything was changing. New manufacturing methods made televisions more affordable, and suddenly, families everywhere wanted one. Department stores displayed them in their windows. Crowds gathered just to watch the moving pictures on the screen. For many Americans, it felt like witnessing the future. Soon, living rooms began to transform. Families arranged their furniture around the television set. Every evening, parents and children would gather together to watch shows, news broadcasts, and live performances coming directly from studios hundreds of miles away. For the first time in history, millions of people could experience the same moment at the exact same time. Comedy shows made families laugh together. Live dramas brought theater into the home. And news broadcasts allowed Americans to actually see the events shaping their nation and the world. Television didn't just entertain people, it changed culture itself. Advertisers quickly realized the power of this new medium. Brands could now reach millions of viewers instantly, creating a new era of television advertising. By the end of the decade, television had become more than just a device. It became the centerpiece of American life. The television revolution of the 1950s reshaped entertainment, journalism, and culture forever. And it all began with a simple glowing screen, lighting up living rooms across America. China took control of Tibet. In the Himalayas lies the mysterious land of Tibet, often called the roof of the world. For centuries, this remote region remained largely isolated from the rest of the world. Surrounded by towering mountains, Tibet developed its own unique culture, deep spiritual traditions, and a way of life centered around Tibetan Buddhism. At the heart of this society stood its spiritual leader, the Dalai Lama, who guided the Tibetan people both politically and spiritually. But by the middle of the 20th century, the political map of Asia was rapidly changing. In 1949, a new communist government came to power in People's Republic of China, led by Mao Zedong. The new Chinese leadership believed that several neighboring regions, including Tibet, had historically been part of China and should now be brought under its control. And soon, Tibet became a major focus of that goal. In October 1950, troops from the People's Liberation Army moved into eastern Tibet. Compared to the large and modern Chinese military, the Tibetan army was small and poorly equipped. Within a short time, Chinese forces defeated Tibetan defenders in a key battle near Chamdo. This victory opened the path for China to establish control over the region. Facing growing military pressure, Tibetan representatives were later compelled to sign the 17-Point Agreement in 1951. The agreement officially brought Tibet under Chinese sovereignty while promising autonomy and protection for Tibetan religion and culture. However, the relationship between Tibet and China would remain deeply complicated. Even today, the status of Tibet continues to be debated around the world. Some view the changes as modernization and development, while others see them as the loss of Tibet's independence and cultural identity. But one thing is undeniable. The events that began in 1950 did more than change Tibet's future. They reshaped the political landscape of Asia for generations to come. The space race begins. At the beginning of the 1950s, the world was entering a new and intense rivalry between two global superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. This rivalry, known as the Cold War, was not only about politics or military power. It was also about science, technology, and the future of space. After the end of World War II, both nations captured and studied advanced German rocket technology. Scientists realized that rockets powerful enough to carry weapons across continents could also reach beyond Earth's atmosphere. Suddenly, space was no longer just a dream for scientists. It was becoming the next battlefield of technological dominance. In the United States, rocket programs began expanding with the help of German engineer Wernher von Braun, who had previously worked on powerful rockets during the war. At the same time, the Soviet Union was developing its own rocket technology under the leadership of the brilliant engineer Sergei Korolev. Both sides understood something very important. Whoever mastered rocket technology would not only control space, but also gain a huge military advantage on Earth. Throughout the early 1950s, laboratories, military bases, and secret research centers worked tirelessly to develop bigger and more powerful rockets. Scientists and engineers were racing against time, pushing the limits of human knowledge and engineering. This growing competition would soon become known as the space race. Just a few years later, this rivalry would lead to incredible milestones: satellites orbiting the Earth, humans traveling into space, and eventually, astronauts walking on the moon. But the foundation of that extraordinary journey began quietly in the early 1950s, when two superpowers looked toward the sky and decided that space would be the next great frontier of human history. Dead Sea Scrolls discovery. And finally, one of the most mysterious discoveries connected to the year 1950. Near the silent shores of the Dead Sea, inside the ancient caves of Qumran, a hidden treasure of history was slowly being revealed to the world. The legendary Dead Sea Scrolls, ancient manuscripts more than 2,000 years old, giving historians an extraordinary glimpse into the beliefs and lives of ancient civilizations. What started as a simple discovery in a desert cave soon became one of the greatest archaeological findings of the 20th century. And with that mystery uncovered, the year 1950 leaves behind a legacy of wars, discoveries, and events that forever changed the course of human history. And with that incredible discovery, the year 1950 comes to an end. A year filled with wars, groundbreaking inventions, political changes, and mysterious discoveries that shaped the modern world. From global conflicts to scientific breakthroughs, these events didn't just change that year, they helped shape the future of our planet. If you enjoyed this journey through history, make sure to subscribe to the channel and join us for more fascinating stories from the past. And in our next video, we'll take you to another important year in history. We'll be exploring the top 10 biggest events of 1951, the moments that continued to change the world. So don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.